Gentlemen and ladies, it is time for some new BigTuna content. Today we're talking about something interesting. So if you've read the 10.1 patch notes, which of course is not coming for a while, there's something that is bothering me. Obviously we're getting some okay-ish stuff, we're getting some buffs-ish. Alright, we have stuff like Wind Fury damage being increased just passively, so it's going to deal 50% increased damage, but Forceful Winds is going to generate less damage, so it's going to be 100% increased damage instead of 200% increased damage. So basically, we're kind of removing the RNG-ness or RNG requirements of Enhancement Shaman just a tad bit, little by little, by just increasing damage of certain abilities just normally. So Wind Fury is going to be doing more damage, and this is what you saw with the Storm Strike / Converging Storms buffs. You know, they nerfed Converging Storms, but they buffed Storm Strike damage normally. So they're slowly but surely removing that RNG / just randomness of Enhancement Shaman, of just having your damage come from like just weird passives, I guess is the best way to put it. So we're getting some okay stuff, but there's one thing that irritates me, and that is, or there's actually two things that irritate me. So one of them is that they're removing Ethereal Form. Now BigTuna, why is that a problem? Ethereal Form is garbage. Well, Ethereal Form, just like many other things in the game, has potential. It's always had potential, but unfortunately Blizzard just didn't see it, or not even didn't see it, didn't even make the effort to see it, and they're just straight up removing the ability. Now that's obviously ticking me off. But what is the other one I was talking about? Well, one of them is that they're removing Water Shield. Now, BigTuna, what the frick do you even mean? Water Shield is not even accessible to Enhancement Shaman. Well, it kind of was and kind of wasn't. So if you went on 10.7 when it originally released, you could see that Water Shield was in the Shaman tree. It was in the Shaman spellbook. And I made a video talking about that, like, you know, when 10.7 was released, and I was like, what the heck? Like, I didn't understand. I couldn't talent into Water Shield. There was no option for me to talent into it, but it was in my spellbook. So I was wondering, maybe that was a bug, but then a bit of talk went around. I was like, okay, it wasn't confirmed, but it was speculated that, okay, it was an ability that you could learn at earlier levels. One of those abilities that kind of just shifts from your talent trees into your spellbook, right? One of those abilities happens quite frequently. So I was like, okay, cool. That obviously granted me ideas, and that's what I am full of, ideas. Now, when I went back on 10.7 after 10.1 released and going on the 10.1 PTR, Water Shield was removed. Now, obviously, BigTuna, why are you upset? It was never confirmed that we were getting Water Shield. Yes, but much like everything else, again, there's so much potential. Enhancement Shaman has incredible amounts of potential to be an actual good spec. Now, and the funny part about that is that you don't need to. I made a video yesterday, and if you want to check it out, you can, talking about ideas for an Enhancement Shaman rework, which I do try to push every here and there. And when you read and when you watch that video, I'm not necessarily tearing down the entire fundamentals of Enhancement Shaman. No, I'm just revamping / redoing just certain things, or giving a little bit of support of what we currently have, defensives and healing. Not massive, just immense changes, no, but just small little tunings here and there, and just maybe some new stuff we could see to just better what we currently have. Not necessarily tearing down what we have now, like let's say what they're doing for Rep Paladins. They're changing Rep Paladins immensely. If you dual Rep Paladins or have played Rets on the PTR, you can see that they're an entirely different class. They feel like an entirely different class, and going up against them is nothing like going against them in retail. Now, back on topic of these two abilities, why am I upset? Because, again, potential. When potential is wasted, potential being wasted is one of the most infuriating things in life in general. So Ethereal Form was just one of those abilities that was just so memey. There was no reason to have this. It replaced your Astral Shift, which is just guaranteed 40% damage reduction. It made you immune to physical damage. Cool, that's great. There are very few immune spells in the game, but you can't cast any spells, you can't even attack, and your movement speed is hindered by 50% for 14 seconds. Now again, this was memey, it was troll. You could sometimes use this against actual idiots. Just much like Counter-Strike Totem, use this stuff at low rating and you'll win a few games. Now unfortunately, abilities like that just work lower rated are usually intended to work at lower rated and aren't really meant to be played seriously, which is unfortunate, which is again, it just locks the potential behind these spells. Now, how could you have fixed Ethereal Form? How could you make it better? Well, A, make it so you it doesn't replace Astral Shift, removing the fact that you can't attack. All right, you can't attack. At least if you could attack, it'll deal like, let's say, maybe a bit less damage, 50% less damage. Cool. And you could cast spells and your movement speed wasn't hindered. All right, so you pretty much gain immunity to physical damage, and you could still attack, and you could still, let's say, heal, but obviously it'll be reduced. So maybe that's one way they could change that. Or here's another thing. There was a Torghast power, and there are some Torghast powers in WoW that actually were pretty good for a lot of classes, and some of them were implemented into the talent tree. One of them being Guardian's Cudgel, which unfortunately it doesn't matter because Capacitator Totem is complete garbage. Blizzard is very evasive and elusive when it comes to giving shamans a defensive ability or just ways to mitigate damage, because whether that's because they think Astral Shield is good enough, or they think our healing counteracts our squishiness, or maybe Shamanistic Rage was just too good of a defensive, I don't know. But they are very evasive on what they want to give shamans in terms of damage mitigation. So you got to be careful when you want to say, hey, I have an idea for defensive. You have to make it so it doesn't really spark that radar of Blizzard of saying, hey, that's probably too OP. So they don't want to give Enhancement Shaman damage mitigation. They don't want to give them actual damage reduction, this percentage of damage being reduced. So the idea of having Ethereal Form kind of being that Torghast power of, making Astral Shift, or maybe even an entirely new defensive, literally just Ethereal Form, but having a different effect of just making Ethereal Form having a 25% chance to resist spells could be cool. Now, how could you make that better? Because obviously just a defensive like that is complete garbage. How could you make that just a little bit better? Well, make it so you have a 25% chance to resist attacks, melee attacks, to resist spells, resist melee attacks. Then why should you keep it separate? Well, keep it separate for A, uniqueness, and B, because when you just have it as just 25% chance to resist attacks, then again, it's the same idea of just stunning you and then your attacks just not being dodged. So have it separate of having a 25% chance to dodge melee attacks and having a 25% chance to resist spells. Keeping it separate. So even if you are stunned, you could still resist some spells if you are facing any bit of comp against any caster. And of course this could also affect other spells, like, hey, let's say a Resto Shaman who's probably gonna lasso me. I have a 25% chance to resist that. All right, it's not necessarily damage mitigation. We have Astral Shift. All right, Blizzard wants to keep that. So how do you work around getting another defensive? Well, making another defensive by making it a different defensive. There are very few abilities in the game that actually, in terms of defensives, that aren't actual like damage reduction. One of them being Fortifying Brew, which just increases your armor and increases your dodge chance. Now obviously that ability is bad, but you get the gist. And then of course you have Evasion, which gives you a 100% dodge chance, and yeah, we all know how good Evasion is. And then you have Blur for Demo Hunters, which is the mixture of a defensive and dodge, being that you can dodge 50% of attacks, 20%, 30% of attacks, and have 20% damage reduction. All right, pretty cool. So the idea of probably having that for Ethereal Form, of being able to have a 25% chance to resist melee attacks or dodge melee attacks, and a 25% chance to resist spells, could be interesting. All right, again, Ethereal Form has so much potential, much like a lot of talents and abilities that shamans have, and a lot of stuff that shaman doesn't have. Again, it's all potential, but Blizzard just refuses to see it. Now, enough of Ethereal Form, alright? I could rant about that all day. What was I talking about Water Shield? Well, Water Shield, like I said, was in our spell book, but they just removed it because, again, it most likely was just an error. Now, again, that ticks me off because potential. Because what I thought we were going to get Water Shield whenever we got Unleashed Shield, whenever Unleashed Shield was added. Because you see here, usually for when you play a different spec, the tooltips of certain abilities will change depending on what spec that is. And obviously you see here, we don't have Water Shield. Water Shield is not available to us, but it's still in this tooltip. So I always thought, well, okay, that's gotta be some speculation that maybe in the future we can get Water Shield, which would be cool because we have 3 shields. Pretty much Lightning Shield is gonna be always guaranteed. You can never swap out of Lightning Shield, Earth Shield. So the second shield from that could be swapping between Lightning Shield and Water Shield. All right, for different scenarios. One being for melees, which is obviously going to be Lightning Shield, and one being for casters, which is for Water Shield. And of course you could use Unleash Shield, and I obviously was like, that's amazing, because the water shield effect from Unleash Shield is absolutely amazing. Reducing damage and healing by 50% while they stand in it, pretty damn good. Alright, so especially when you're doing RBGs, or I mean, again, if you've played Restoration Shaman, you know how potent this can be. You go into Unleash Shield, you can root the target, it'll obviously be rooted from your Earth Shield, but you can go into a second root with your Earth God Totem and just keep them in that Unleash Shield. And now that you obviously have Static Field Totem, again, Unleash Shield, Water Shield, Static Field Totem in that Water Shield, they move out of it, you can port your Static Field Totem. Like, it's pretty crazy. You know, the ideas and potential of what this could have brung was too great for them to just simply remove it. Now, this also gave the idea of just having multiple shields, or having, again, a variety of shields. One thing I talked about or asked for people was, what was your ideal dream Enhancement Shaman? What's your ideal Enhancement Shaman version? Would it be an older version, like let's say Mop with Stormblast one-shots, or maybe WoD future expansions of having access to multiple healing ways, like Healing Tide Totem and a lot of healing, you know, modifiers? Or would it be something like Classic WoW of having access to a lot of your totems and having just big Wind Fury hits and of course two-handed enhancement? Or is it something that's completely new, that's something we've never heard of or seen about Enhancement Shaman? What is your ideal form? Now, my ideal form of Enhancement Shaman is basically combining the two, having a lot of old school uniqueness of, let's say, having totems and weapon imbues, all right, back to Enhancement Shaman, but also something new of having, again, just that passiveness, of having that, I guess, in WoW in terms that you could understand, passive income for Enhancement Shaman. I don't really need to do a whole lot. I have a lot of passive kind of, let's say, you know, abilities or benefits, you know, a lot of team-wide benefits that you know, that could happen, you know. And one of those comes in the form of just having variety in terms of your weapon imbues and a lot of your active effects, like let's say your shields. When I thought that we were getting a Water Shield, that could give the idea of shield swapping, constantly swapping between shields. Now, obviously that'd be a little bit irritating, but what if they added multiple shields, added multiple shields, a lightning shield, a wind shield, right, a fire shield, something like that. That'll obviously have different benefits depending on certain situations. Let's say if you want to live more, you would obviously take Earth Shield, and maybe you would want to take, like, let's say, let's come up with like a good name for our shields here. Let's say like Magma Shield. I don't know, maybe something like that. All right, that'll make it so whenever you are attacked by melee attackers, whenever you suffer damage, you have a chance to gain 5% damage reduction, stacking up 5 times, or stacking up, you know, 2 times, something like that, or gain X amount of armor for going up against melees. Having certain shields to counteract different scenarios is that'd be a pretty cool idea, because Enhancement Shaman has always been the purest balance of WoW. And what I mean by that, I mean that it was always a spec that could do well into everything. You were a spec that didn't have all its points spent into one field, but had it usually spread out in terms of multiple fields. Okay, you had healing, cool. You had damage reduction in the form of Shamanistic Rage, which was a really good defensive. You didn't really need another defensive other than Shamanistic Rage. So you had healing, get a bit of healing, get a bit of damage reduction. You had utility in the form of totems. You had ways to deal with casters of having a range slow and having grounding totem. You had a way to catch up to casters and kite in the form of Ghostral form. So obviously you didn't have high points in everything in one spot, or okay, I have tons of mobility, but I'm really weak defensively. Or hey, I have a ton of burst damage, but I'm a glass cannon, you know? Or I have a lot of defensives and ways to survive, but I do no damage. No, we had our points spread out into everything, which is what I loved about Enhancement Shaman. Basically, you were the purest form of what you could go up against any class in WoW and pretty much have the same effect as if you were going up against a different class in WoW. Variety, points spread out evenly. And that's what I would kind of like to see in the form of having just variety in terms of what you have passively and what you have actively. Like, again, shields, having different shields for different scenarios. Passive active stuff in terms of buffs like shields and, you know, weapon imbues is something that could be pretty cool for Enhancement Shaman. Again, that's what I thought would see the light of day, of having Water Shield, having different shields for different scenarios, having Lightning Shield for melee and having Water Shield for casters. You know, it's something that would be pretty cool. But unfortunately, we're not going to get that because I mean, yeah, it was never confirmed, but again, they could have just saw it and been like, huh, this actually has a bit of potential. Again, if it was just like a little rant video of something that kind of irritated me. But again, if you agree with what I say, or again, if you have your own ideas of, of what your own ideas for Ethereal form, or what ideas you had when we got, Water Shield, then leave it in the comments. Have a bit of a discussion. But that's just something I wanted to say. I mean, again, I love Enhancement Shaman. It's my main. It's been my main for a very long time. So hope you all had a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next life. Again, you gotta subscribe. You gotta comment something nice. And yeah, hopefully I see you guys in Tomorrowland. Peace.